I'm Jake Morrison, and for 8 years I was married to Melissa Sterling. Notice she never took my last name. That should have been my first clue. The Sterlings owned a massive estate outside Newport Beach, the kind of old California money that doesn't need to announce itself. Melissa's grandfather made a fortune in shipping, her dad, Charles, tripled it through investments, and her brother, Brandon, well, Brandon existed, and apparently that was his entire job description. I grew up in Cleveland. My dad worked in manufacturing, my mom was a nurse. We weren't poor, but we definitely weren't sterling rich. I became an architect through scholarships and loans, not trust funds. The dinner was Melissa's idea. We hadn't done a big family thing in months since Brandon was always traveling for his consulting business. He showed up late, naturally, wearing that studied casual look rich guys pay stylists to achieve. His cologne arrived before he did. Everything started fine. Charles held court with golf club stories, Patricia floated around refilling wine glasses, and I played my usual role of quiet, grateful son-in-law who knows his place. Then Brandon turned his attention to me. So Jake, Melissa mentioned you took on some public project, a library? The energy in the room shifted immediately. I explained it was a downtown redesign, creating community spaces and a digital learning center. Brandon interrupted me. How civic-minded. What does something like that pay these days? His smile never reached his eyes. It's not about the money, I said carefully. It's about creating something that serves the community. Right, the noble pursuits. Brandon took a long sip of wine. Must be nice to work on passion projects when someone else is paying your mortgage. The silence that followed felt physical. Melissa's hand slipped away from mine under the table. I contribute to our household, I said, keeping my voice even. Of course you do, Brandon said. It's just, well, we all know Melissa's trust fund is the real breadwinner in your marriage. No shame in that. Not every man has the resourcefulness to marry well. My jaw tightened. I married Melissa because I love her. Did you? Or did you love the idea of her? The whole package deal, the lifestyle upgrade? He leaned back, studying me like I was some interesting specimen. Blue-collar kid from Cleveland meets a sterling daughter. That's not love. That's winning the lottery. I set down my fork carefully. If I'd held it any tighter, it would have bent. You don't know anything about our relationship, I said. Don't I? Brandon grinned. Let me guess. You met at some charity event Melissa was obligated to attend. You saw an opportunity. You were charming, self-deprecating, played up the whole diamond in the rough thing. And she fell for it because my sister has always had a savior complex. Each word was surgical. That's enough, Charles said. But there was no force behind it. He looked almost amused. I pushed back from the table, the chair legs scraping against the hardwood. Sit down, Jake, Melissa said quietly. Not to defend me, to control me. Yeah, Jake, sit down, Brandon echoed. Don't be so sensitive. We're family here. Honesty, I repeated. Is that what you call this? What would you call it? His eyes glittered. He was enjoying himself. I'd call it a man compensating for his own insecurities by attacking someone he thinks can't fight back. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. Insecurities? Brandon set down his glass deliberately. That's bold from a man living in a house my sister owns, driving a car my sister leases, wearing a watch my sister bought him. Marcus, Patricia tried, but her heart wasn't in it. No, Mom. Let me clarify something for Jake. Brandon leaned forward. You're not one of us. You will never be one of us. You're a charity case Melissa took pity on. And the only reason we tolerate you is because she hasn't gotten bored yet and traded you in for someone with an actual pedigree. I felt something cold and sharp crystallize in my chest. I looked at Melissa, waiting for her to say something, anything, to defend our marriage, to defend me. She met my eyes for half a second, then looked away. Well? Brandon spread his hands. Nothing to say? I stood up. Jake, Melissa's voice carried a warning. Don't make a scene. Scene. I'm not making a scene, I'm leaving. You'll do no such thing. Her face flushed. Sit down. Why? I asked simply. Because I'm telling you to. Because this is my family, and you will not disrespect them by walking out because your feelings got hurt. My feelings? I said slowly. Your brother just called our marriage a con job, and you want me to sit here and take it because walking away would be disrespectful? He was joking, Jake. God, you're so sensitive. This is how we talk to each other. Light teasing? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Melissa, he said I married you for money. Didn't you? Brandon interjected. Partially, at least. Come on, be honest. I ignored him, kept my focus on my wife. Tell him he's wrong. Tell him I married you because I love you. Melissa's mouth opened and closed. Her eyes darted to her father, to her brother, back to me. The silence stretched. Melissa, I said, and my voice cracked despite my best efforts. Of course you love me, Jake, but Brandon has a point about... I felt something inside me break, not shatter. Breaking implies violence. This was more like ice calving from a glacier. Inevitable. Apologize to my brother, Melissa said suddenly, her voice sharp. You've been rude to him all night. Glaring. Making snide comments. I've barely spoken. Exactly. You've been sitting there judging, making everyone uncomfortable. Apologize to Brandon or get out of my house. My house. Not our house. Mine. Everyone was watching. Patricia with her hand pressed to her collarbone. Charles with raised eyebrows, mildly curious. Brandon with that smirk, that goddamn smirk that said he'd won before the game even started. I walked toward Brandon. Melissa tensed. I stopped directly in front of him, close enough to see the pores on his nose, the self-satisfied gleam in his eyes. He was still smirking, certain I'd beg, certain I'd apologize. I looked Brandon Sterling directly in the eyes and spoke one sentence. Your offshore accounts in the Caymans total $19 million in untaxed income, which the IRS doesn't know about yet, but they will on Monday when I submit the evidence I've been collecting for the past 2 years. The room fell silent, not the silence of anticipation, the silence of a world ending. Brandon's smirk evaporated. His face went through confusion, disbelief, and then pure white fear. You're bluffing, he whispered. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a flash drive, set it gently on the table. Am I? Melissa was staring at the flash drive like it was a live grenade. Jake, what is this? I didn't look at her. Couldn't, yet. Your brother has been running a shell company called Apex Advisory Group, I said, my voice eerily calm. It's registered in Delaware, operates in the Caymans, and exists solely to help clients avoid paying taxes. I have the incorporation documents, bank statements, client lists, and internal emails where Brandon explicitly discusses the illegality of the operation. Patricia made a small whimpering sound. I also have evidence of bribes paid to a county official for zoning changes, evidence of insider trading, and evidence that he's been skimming from the family trust. Small amounts, nothing Charles would notice, but over 5 years, it adds up to about $400,000. Charles stood up so fast his chair fell backward. That's impossible. It's not. I finally looked at Melissa. She'd gone pale. I'm an architect. I notice patterns, structures, inconsistencies, and for 2 years I've been noticing a lot of inconsistencies in your brother's finances. Why? Melissa's voice was barely audible. Why would you do this? Because I loved you, I said simply. And I thought if I could prove I was smart enough to protect the sterling interest, that maybe you'd respect me. Maybe they'd respect me. By spying on my family? Her voice rose. By threatening my brother? I wasn't going to use it, I said. I swear, Melissa, I collected this as insurance, as proof that I understood your world. I was never going to submit it to anyone. Then why? Because he called our marriage a fraud. Because you've spent 8 years making me feel like I'm not good enough. And because your sister just chose you over me without a second's hesitation. Brandon had recovered some composure. This is extortion. No, I said. Extortion would be if I asked you for something in exchange for my silence. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just telling you that on Monday morning, the IRS, the SEC, and the California Attorney General's office will all receive copies of everything I've found. You fool, Brandon breathed. Maybe, but I'm a fool who kept meticulous records. Tell me, Brandon, do you keep meticulous records? Or were you sloppy because you thought nobody was watching? Charles found his voice. Jake, let's talk about this. Surely we can come to some arrangement. There is no arrangement. I looked around at these people I'd tried so hard to please. I'm done. You're done? Melissa's face twisted. You don't get to be done. This is my family, my life. I can. I pulled off my wedding ring and set it next to her plate. I want a divorce, Melissa. No, she said. No, you're upset. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking clearly, for the first time in years. I loved you so much that I became small for you. I made myself quiet and convenient because I thought that's what you needed. But you didn't marry me because you loved me. You married me because I was safe, because I'd never challenge you or your family. And tonight, when your brother called our marriage a lie, You couldn't defend it because some part of you thinks he's right. That's not true, she whispered, but there was no conviction. Isn't it? You couldn't even take my name, Melissa. 8 years and you couldn't even take my name. I turned to leave. If you walk out that door, Melissa said, her voice shaking, don't come back. I stopped, turned. I won't. And if you submit that evidence, I will make sure you get nothing in the divorce. My father's lawyers will bury you. I know, I said. I don't care. And I meant it. I walked out with nothing but my phone, my wallet, and that flash drive. Behind me, I heard Melissa start to cry, heard Patricia trying to comfort her, heard Brandon shouting about lawyers. I didn't look back. I called an Uber. While I waited, I thought about what came next. I had a small apartment downtown I'd kept as an office. I could stay there. I had some savings. Not much, but enough. My phone buzzed. A text from Melissa, please come back, we can talk about this. I blocked her number. Another text from an unknown number. You just made the biggest mistake of your life, Brandon. I blocked him too. Then my phone rang. A woman's voice, professional. Mr. Morrison, this is Jennifer Hayes. I'm an agent with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. I received an interesting package at my office this evening. My blood went cold. I'm sorry, what? A flash drive, no return address. It contains evidence of tax fraud and money laundering related to a Brandon Sterling and an entity called Apex Advisory Group. I sat up straight. I didn't send that. The postmark suggests it was mailed 3 days ago, 3 days before the dinner. I don't understand, I said slowly. Neither do I, Mr. Morrison. Which is why I'd like to ask you some questions. Would you be available to come to my office tomorrow? Am I in trouble? That depends. Did you compile this evidence? I thought about lying. Thought about what Melissa had said about her father's lawyers. Yes, I said. I compiled it. Why? Because I thought it might be useful someday. And why mail it to me now? I didn't, I swear. I have the flash drive in my pocket right now. Silence, then. So there are 2 copies, apparently. I could hear her thinking. Mr. Morrison, tax fraud is a serious crime. But you know what I care about even more? Corruption. If what's on this drive is accurate, Brandon Sterling facilitated tax evasion for dozens of individuals. That's the kind of case that makes careers. I'm not looking for a career, I said. No, but you might be looking for immunity. Cooperate with our investigation, provide testimony, and I'll make sure you're protected. Personally, the Sterlings are powerful people, Mr. Morrison. If they think you brought this to our attention, they'll come after you with everything they have, but if you're a federal witness, that's different. I leaned my head against the car window. I'll need to think about it. You have until Monday. That's when I'm officially opening the investigation. She hung up. I sat in the Uber, mind racing. Someone had mailed evidence to the IRS 3 days ago. But who? When I got to my apartment, I found an email waiting. No sender name. Subject line, you're welcome. Jake, you don't know me, but I know you. I've watched you for 2 years compiling evidence, but never using it, hoping that being smart would earn respect from people who will never respect anyone they consider beneath them. My name is Amy. I was Brandon's assistant for 3 years. I saw everything. When you started investigating him, I noticed. I watched you struggle with whether to use what you found. 3 days ago, I made the decision for you. I copied your evidence and sent it to the IRS. By Monday, the investigation will be public. Brandon will be arrested. You'll be free. You might hate me for taking the choice away, but they never would have let you walk away. So I did what you couldn't. I lit the match. Cooperate with the IRS. Tell them everything, and when the dust settles, start over. Build the life you actually want. You deserve better than them. You always did. I read it 3 times, then I started to laugh. The kind of laughter that comes when you realize your entire world has been rearranged by someone you've never met. Amy had sent the evidence 3 days ago, which meant by the time I'd walked into that dinner, by the time Brandon had called me a gold digger, by the time I'd threatened him with the flash drive, it was already over. The countdown had already started. My phone rang. Melissa. Jake. Her voice was ragged. Please tell me this is a nightmare. I'm not doing anything, I said. Not anymore. Someone else already submitted the evidence 3 days ago. The IRS is opening an investigation Monday whether I cooperate or not. Silence. Then, who? I don't know. It wasn't quite a lie. Does it matter? Of course it matters. Brandon could go to prison. My family, our family. Not our family, I interrupted gently. Your family, Melissa. You made that very clear tonight. I was angry. I didn't mean, yes, you did. You meant every word. And you know what? I don't blame you. You were born into that world. You can't see outside of it. Brandon is your brother. Of course you'd defend him over me. Then come back, she said desperately. Come home. We'll figure this out together. No, Melissa, I want a divorce. That part wasn't anger. That part I meant. You're really leaving me? Because of tonight? Because I didn't defend you the way you wanted? Because of every night for the last 8 years, I said. Tonight was just the first time I was honest about it. I could hear her breathing, trying to keep it together. I thought you loved me, she whispered finally. I do. But love isn't enough when the person you love doesn't respect you, and you don't, Melissa. You never have. She didn't answer because we both knew the truth. I'll have a lawyer contact you about the divorce, I said. You can have the house, the cars, all of it. I don't want anything that came from your family. Jake, goodbye, Melissa. I hung up before she could respond, blocked her number before she could call back. Then I sat in the dark and cried. Not for the marriage I was ending, not even for the life I was leaving behind. I cried for the man I'd been when I met Melissa, the man who'd believed he could be enough, the man who'd slowly learned that some gaps can't be bridged. Eventually, I ran out of tears. I opened my laptop and started typing. Agent Hayes, I'll cooperate with your investigation. I can come to your office Monday morning. I'll bring everything I have. Send. Then another email. Amy, I don't know who you are. I don't know why you did this, but thank you. Thank you for seeing what I couldn't see. Thank you for making the choice I was too afraid to make. I hope someday I can buy you a coffee and hear your story. Send. Monday arrived like an executioner. Brandon was arrested at 6 in the morning. Every news station covered it live. Brandon being led out in handcuffs. Melissa standing in the doorway with Patricia collapsed behind her. It was objectively what I'd wanted. Felt terrible. The next few weeks were brutal. The Sterlings hired the best criminal defense attorney in California. They hired a crisis PR firm. They hired private investigators to dig into my background. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. So they created scandals. Stories leaked that I'd had an affair during my marriage. Completely false. Another story claimed I'd plagiarized architectural designs, also false. A third suggested I had gambling debts, again, provably false. But the stories kept coming. The strategy was simple. Throw enough mud and some will stick. My lawyer filed defamation suits against 3 media outlets. We probably won't win, she admitted, but it sends a message. Meanwhile, the criminal case moved forward. The evidence was too solid. A trial date was set for 8 months away. 3 months before the trial, something unexpected happened. Someone knocked on my apartment door. I checked the peephole and saw a young woman I didn't recognize. Mr. Morrison, my name is Emily Sterling. I'm Brandon's daughter. I opened the door. Emily was 24, had just graduated from college. I'd met her a few times at family gatherings, always seemed uncomfortable at the lavish Sterling events. I need to talk to you, she said. I let her in. We sat in awkward silence before she found her words. My father's going to prison. Everyone knows it. Even my father knows it, though he won't admit it. I'm sorry, I said. Don't be. He did this to himself. She looked at me with clear eyes. I need you to know something. I'm glad you exposed him. I hadn't expected that. My father is not a good man, Emily continued. He's never been a good man. I've known that since I was 12. That's when I overheard him on the phone laughing about finding loopholes to avoid taxes, joking about how the IRS was too stupid to catch him. Why are you telling me this? Because Aunt Melissa has been calling me, asking me to testify for the defense, to talk about what a good father Brandon is, and I'm going to testify for the prosecution instead. I stared at her. Emily, that will destroy your relationship with your family. I know, but Mr. Morrison, you testified. You risked everything to tell the truth. How can I do less? I recognized the look in her eyes. I'd seen it in the mirror for months now. Have you talked to the prosecution? Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first, to see if you think I'm doing the right thing. I think you're doing an incredibly hard thing, I said carefully. Whether it's right depends on what you can live with. Can you live with testifying against your father? Yes. Can you live with not testifying, knowing what you know, No. Then you have your answer. The trial of Brandon Sterling began 8 months after that dinner. I sat in the gallery, surrounded by reporters and curious spectators. Brandon sat at the defense table in a perfectly tailored suit, looking calm and confident. Melissa sat behind him with Charles and Patricia. They all looked smaller somehow, diminished. The prosecution was methodical, building the case piece by piece. They explained offshore accounts, shell companies, conspiracy. They showed documents proving Brandon had helped clients hide income. Then they called witnesses. First, financial experts and IRS agents. Then Brandon's sufferers took the stand. Maria Santos, an elderly woman who'd lost her retirement savings. She testified about how Brandon had promised to help her invest her late husband's life insurance, then steered her into fraudulent investments. "I trusted him," she said, crying. "I had no idea he was stealing from me." Then David Park, a nonprofit director whose scholarship fund had been decimated. "We had 14 million. We were going to send 200 students to college. Because of what Brandon Sterling did, we can now send maybe 70. That's 130 lives changed, 130 futures stolen." By the end of the second week, the prosecution had established a clear pattern. Brandon preyed on people who trusted him. Then it was my turn to testify. The prosecutor, Margaret Chen, started with easy questions: my name, my profession, how I knew Brandon. "I married his sister," I said. "I was part of the Sterling family for 8 years. I described my investigation, how I'd compiled evidence, how I'd stored it without using it." "Why didn't you report what you'd found immediately?" Chen asked. "Because I loved my wife, because I didn't want to destroy her family, because I kept hoping I was wrong." "What changed?" "At a family dinner, Brandon humiliated me. He called my marriage a fraud. My wife didn't defend me. Instead, she told me to apologize to Brandon or leave. I realized I'd spent 8 years making myself small for people who would never respect me." Chen showed the jury key documents. Emails where Brandon discussed helping clients evade taxes. Bank statements showing millions flowing through Cayman accounts. Then it was the defense attorney's turn to cross-examine. "Mr. Morrison, you've testified that you loved your wife, but you spied on her family for 2 years, correct?" "I accessed files I had permission to access." "Did you tell your wife what you were doing?" "No." "So you deceived her?" I stopped. He was right. "Yes. You've also testified that you asked for nothing in the divorce." "Why?" "Because I didn't marry Melissa for money. But you did live comfortably during your marriage, didn't you? A house in Newport worth $3 million, a luxury car, expensive vacations." "Melissa provided those things. You enjoyed them?" "I suppose I did." "So when Brandon Sterling suggested you'd married his sister for her wealth, he touched a nerve, didn't he?" "Objection," Chen called. "Speculation." "Withdrawn, Mr. Morrison. Isn't it true that you wanted revenge on the Sterling family?" I thought about lying, but I had come this far on truth. "Yes," I said. "Part of me wanted revenge." The defense attorney smiled. "So this whole prosecution is based on evidence compiled by a man who admits he wanted revenge on the family that took him in and supported him." Objection. Argumentative. Sustained. But the damage was done. They'd planted the seed that I was a vindictive ex-husband who couldn't be trusted. The trial continued. Then Emily Sterling took the stand. The courtroom went silent when she was sworn in. Melissa looked slapped. Patricia gasped. "Ms. Sterling, how are you related to the defendant?" Chen asked. "He's my father. Why did you decide to testify?" Emily looked at her father. "Because someone needs to tell the truth about who he is." She described a childhood of privilege and neglect, a father who taught her that winning was everything, that rules were for other people. "When I was 12, Emily said, I overheard him laughing about helping a client hide money from the IRS. I asked him about it later. He said smart people know the difference between legal and ethical, and they choose whichever benefits them most." The defense attorney's cross-examination was brutal. He attacked her motives, suggested she was estranged from her father for personal reasons. "Isn't it true you and your father had a falling out last year over your career choice?" "We disagreed, yes. I didn't want to work for a company that helps people evade taxes." "So you're angry at him?" "I'm disappointed in him." "There's a difference. Disappointed enough to send your own father to prison?" Emily's voice didn't waver. "Disappointed enough to tell the truth, regardless of consequences." It was the most powerful moment of the trial. The jury deliberated for 3 days. When they filed back in, I tried to read their faces. "On count 1, Tax evasion, how do you find? Guilty. Melissa made a sound like she'd been hit. On count 2, money laundering, how do you find? Guilty. 19 counts. Guilty on all 19. 3 weeks later, I returned for sentencing. The judge looked at Brandon. Mr. Sterling, you've been convicted of 19 felonies. You systematically defrauded the government and your own clients over more than 10 years. The evidence suggests you stole more than $80 million in unpaid taxes and client funds. She paused. Therefore, I'm sentencing you to 30 years in federal prison. You'll be eligible for parole after 22 years. Brandon was 43. He'd be 65 before he had any chance of freedom. As they led Brandon away in handcuffs, he looked at me, not with anger, with recognition, as if he finally understood that underestimating me had been his fatal mistake. The next morning, I received divorce papers. Melissa was no longer contesting anything. I signed them. 8 years ended with a signature. The library opened in April. I stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, watching people explore. Children in reading nooks, teenagers at computers, elderly folks browsing books. This was what made it matter. Beautiful work. I turned. Amy Richardson stood behind me, smiling. She looked different, lighter somehow. You came back, I said. I promised I would if Brandon went to prison. She looked around. This is wonderful, Jake. This is what you were meant to do. We walked through the library together, talking. She told me about her life in hiding, the relief of knowing Brandon was locked away. How's Emily? I asked. Thriving. She's working for a nonprofit that does tax advocacy for low-income families. I smiled. Good for her. And you? How are you, really? I thought about it. I'm okay. Some days are harder than others. I still think about Melissa sometimes. But I'm building a life that's mine. Work I care about, relationships based on honesty. It's smaller than my life with the Sterlings, but it's real. That night, I sat on my balcony, looking at the city lights. My phone buzzed. Jake, this is Melissa. I know I have no right to contact you, but I need to tell you something. You were right. About Brandon, about my family, about all of it. I spent my whole life pretending not to see what was in front of me. I'm sorry for how I treated you, for not defending you. You deserve better. I read it 3 times. Part of me wanted to respond with anger. Instead, I wrote, "Thank you for saying that. I hope you find peace." Then I blocked the number, not out of cruelty, out of self-preservation. Melissa was part of my past, a chapter that had taught me essential lessons about self-worth. But it was a chapter I had closed. My future was unwritten, smaller and quieter than the life I'd had with the Sterlings. But it was mine. Completely, authentically mine. And that was worth more than all the Newport estates and family connections in the world. The next morning, I started work on a new project, a community center in a low-income neighborhood. The pay was modest, the timeline tight. I loved it because it mattered. This was who I was meant to be all along. Not the man who married a Sterling, just Jake Morrison, architect, builder of spaces that welcome everyone. A man who'd learned that sometimes the only way to build something real is to first burn down the elaborate fiction you've been living in. 3 years later, I received a letter from Brandon, forwarded through his attorney. I almost threw it away, but curiosity won. Jake, I know you have no reason to read this. You probably hate me. You should. I've spent 3 years thinking about what I did, who I became, the people I hurt. I was wrong about you. At that dinner, when I mocked you for not being one of us, I was projecting my own insecurities. You were everything I pretended to be, but wasn't. Honest, principled, genuinely talented at something meaningful. I spent my life proving I was the smartest person in the room, and I was so focused on being smart that I forgot to be good. I destroyed lives. I broke laws. You stopped me. I hate you for it. I thank you for it. Both are true. My sister still won't speak to me. My daughter visits once a year to tell me she's disappointed. My parents are elderly and broken. I did that. Not you, me. I have 19 more years here. I'll be an old man when I get out. I wanted you to know that I understand now. The truth matters. People matter more than profit. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know you were right about everything. I folded the letter, put it in a drawer. I didn't respond because Brandon didn't need my forgiveness. He needed to live with what he'd done. And I didn't need his admission that I'd been right. I'd stopped needing validation from the Sterlings the moment I walked out of that dinner. I went back to my drafting table, back to the community center design. Outside my window, the sun was setting. The world kept turning, indifferent to family dramas and prison sentences, and the small triumphs of men who chose honesty over comfort. In my small apartment, surrounded by work I loved, living a life entirely my own, I was finally completely at peace. The silence I'd created that night at the Sterling dinner had shattered their perfect life. But it had also freed mine. And in the end, that was all that mattered.